Welcome to the History of Witchcraft series. If you haven't seen my other videos, definitely check out my channel. If you enjoy this one, you may like to learn more about the history of witchcraft. So today I'm getting into the Sumerians, the Babylonians, as well as Ishtar and Isis. And there is lots of videos to follow. The Sumerians, whose civilization flourished from around the 4th millennium BC in what is today known as Iraq. And the later Babylonians had a fairly bleak view of the world around them. For them, the world was full of spirits, and many of them were bad. As a result, each person decided his or her own personal deity for protection from attack. One of the most ferocious of the bad spirits was Lilith, a precursor to the later Hebrew Lilith or Lilith. Lilith was a fierce, barren female demon who sported wings and talons on her feet and hands and prowled the night skies hunting for victims. These were usually sleeping men, and she either seduced them or sucked their blood. Also known as Ardat Lilith uttered terrible shrieks as she flew the skies, often accompanied by owls and lions. A similar demon was Labartu, who carried a snake in each hand. Though her case, the victims were mothers and children. Though Lilith and Labartu were spirits and not human, their horrible traits were ascribed by later Western culture to be demonic witches of the late Middle Ages and beyond. In the Sumerian and Babylonian societies, magic was widespread, although it was, to an extent, detached from religion. The population used charms, fortune tellers, diviners, necromancy, and oracles. Witches could be hired to put curses on others or to lift bad spirits. It was in this reputedly decadent society that female witches became associated with prostitution through the presence of sacred temple prostitutes. This association between witches and what they saw as loose morals developed in Hebrew society and beyond. Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, was the great mother goddess of that religion. She performed a role in the Babylonian pantheon similar to that of the Sumerian goddess Inanna. Within Ishtar, we see some of the aspects that are typical of the differing roles of a goddess. She represented fertility and was a creator of life, and also protected men against evil. But Ishtar also represented the underworld, and this was connected to the endless cycle of birth, death, and the rebirth of life. As is common with many ancient goddesses, Ishtar was both lover and sister to the same god. In her case, Tammuz. Some say he was, in fact, her lover and son, another common trait found in the ancient world of gods. Such duality reflects the view that their different traits are all ultimately part of the wholeness of the universe. The legend is that when Ishtar descended into the underworld to rescue Tammuz, her death was resulted in the end of growth and fertility, which resumed only when she returned. Tammuz had apparently gone to seduce the goddess Ereshkigal, but ended up being enslaved by her. When Ishtar arrived, she had to pass through 7 gates, shedding clothing and jewelry as she went. By the last gate, Ishtar was naked of all of her clothes and all her power. As Ishtar stood helpless, the goddess Ereshkigal, her own sister, nailed her to the wall and left her there. According to the legend, the god Enki was prevailed upon to send plant and water to save her, and Ishtar was restored. This clearly reflects her role as goddess of both life and death and the endless cycle of life. Other versions, Ishtar has to promise that her lover will stay in the underworld for part of the year, while she resides there for the other half. There is a wall in now Iraq that has the goddess Ishtar shown and was considered the mother goddess of that culture. And like many gods and goddesses, was also associated with animals. She was also known as the heavenly cow. Actually, a number of animals were held as sacred to the goddess Ishtar, including the lion and the dove. In the palace of the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar II, which I'm probably saying that wrong, there is governors praying to the god Ishtar, the mother goddess, and Adad, the storm god. In the 8th century, there is carvings that are famous that also show Ishtar, who seats herself on a griffin, a creature which is half eagle and half lion. The ancient gods were often invoked as a protection against harm or evil spirits, and they would carve this in stone. Isis, the attitude toward magic and witchcraft in Egypt was different from that of Babylonian and Sumerian culture. In Egypt, magic was part of the society's religious view of the world and people's interaction with the gods. They saw the universe as a whole and interconnected, not divided between the natural and the supernatural. In this society, the magician and witch had an important and respected role. Less emphasis was placed on the notion of pure evil, though there were evil demons and magic that could be and often was used for bad purposes. The great goddess Isis, one of the most powerful and important goddesses of the ancient world, was herself revered as a great practitioner of magic. The story goes that she had been a mortal magician until she acquired the immortality of the gods by tricking the great sun god Ra into revealing his secret name. Isis achieved this by collecting some of his spit and turning this into a venomous snake. The serpent was left in Ra's path and bit him, causing the great sun god unutterable pain. The resourcefulness Isis was called to help the suffering of Ra and was used for her a magical ability. At first, Isis used all the other names by which Ra was known to mankind, but it did not work. Eventually, the resourceful magician suggested that if Ra gave her his secret name, the name that had not been uttered since the start of creation, she could use its great healing power to remove the snake's venom. So Ra finally agreed, and Isis healed him at the point and at the same time, becoming an immortal and powerful goddess, known as she of the many names. Other names include Lady of Life and Queen of the Heavens. The goddess Isis was one of the most powerful and revered gods of the ancient world, whose worship extended far beyond the geographical confines of Egypt. Osiris was the husband and brother of Isis. Once again, here's an example of the same god fulfilling two roles. According to legend, Osiris was killed and dismembered by his brother Set. Isis used her great magic to find the scattered parts of his body and bring Osiris back to life briefly before he disappeared back to rule the underworld. Meanwhile, Isis had a son, Horus, whom she hid and protected from Seth until he was old enough to defend himself. These attributes of Isis give some idea of why she was so greatly worshipped and loved throughout not just Egypt, but in later centuries. Isis is a loyal partner, a strong and protective mother, a healer, and great worker of magic. Her name meant throne or seat, and as a mother of Horus, she was seen by extension as mother of the pharaohs. She is often depicted with an ankh, the Egyptian symbol of life. In her representations, Isis is often shown wearing a crown with a cow's or bull's horns on it. The goddess has also been representing suckling her son Horus. As already mentioned, this image bears some comparison to the later Christian depiction of Mother Mary and the baby Jesus. And like Isis, Mary was also to be described as the Queen of Heaven. Isis is associated with the dog star Sirius, and one of her symbols is the moon. Later Christians considered the image of Virgin Mary with the infant Jesus as a resemblance to earlier depictions of Isis with her Horus, who was also conceived by magical means. This is not to suggest that Mary was a later aspect of Isis, but that the devotion upon Mary shows she may have performed in a restricted way some of the functions of this goddess in an otherwise very male Christian theology. I hope you enjoyed this information. There is more to come. Check out my next video. Subscribe to my channel and check me out on Facebook, East Coast Mystic. Have a great day. Thank you for listening. Many blessings.